Welcome to the Joyful Frugalista, the podcast that's all about living a richer life with less. I'm your host, Serina Bird, author and passionate frugalista. Each episode, we dive into inspiring stories, practical tips and joyful conversations that help you create abundance, embrace mindful spending, and live your best life, all without breaking the bank. So grab a cuppa, get comfy, and let's explore how being a frugalista can lead to freedom, happiness, and a whole lot of joy. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice.
Hello, Frugal, and welcome. Today I have a special guest, and of course, all of my guests are special. Today we are going to talk about financial empowerment, especially for women. And we've also got a solid financial gift to discuss that's way better than chocolates or chrysanthemums for Mother's Day. My guest today is someone you may already know, and that's Mel Browne. She's an author, financial educator and entrepreneur, known for her straight-talking, practical advice on money and mindset. Mel is the author of several best-selling books, including I'm not sure quite what I'm supposed to say on this podcast, but anyway, it's If Your Finances and Budgets Don't Work, But This Does. She's passionate about helping women understand their money story, ditch financial stress and build lives that align with their values. Mel brings a unique blend of finance, psychology and personal insight, and I'm so thrilled to have her on here today. So big welcome to you, Mel.
Thanks so much, Serina.
Thank you for being here. Love the title of your book, and I'm sure you get a lot of giggles.
Absolutely do, and I'm always curious as to, are you going to say the name? I've been in corporates where they're very hesitant, so yeah, it's good fun.
Well, it doesn't worry me so much. It's just like if you're going to swear on a podcast, you usually need to declare it. And
exactly.
It's true that I just don't want to go through that hassle.
So fair.
So let's start at the very beginning. So financial literacy. Why is this such a big passion for you?
I think for many reasons. I didn't see it modelled in my household, in that my mum was the very traditional housewife where my dad would just tell her this is how it's going to be. When she wanted to go to have part-time work, he said, well, you can work, but nothing is to change in the household. I don't want my life to change. He would put documents in front of her and just tell her to sign it and to trust him. He gave her housekeeping and she had to account for it. And I remember at a very young age watching her going, I never want that. And I think today we probably would have called that coercive control. But back then, for too many women, that was simply how it was. And when I went through my divorce in my 30s and made really stupid decisions, even though by then I was an accountant, I was someone who presumably knew what to do with money, what became really apparent is that it doesn't matter if you have little or know little about money or if you have a lot. We can behave really poorly with money, particularly because of what we know. And that really got me passionate about helping women particularly become better at both building their businesses and creating wealth. And I'm a Western Sydney chick, so I did not grow up with money. I'm very much self-taught. And so part of the reason why I talk about my story and I talk about my financial position today as a multimillionaire is because I didn't see women that was self-made from where I lived and what I'd been through. So for me, it's championing that and it's highlighting for women that it's not selfish, that it's actually a really positive thing to want and to have.
It's easy to look back on those days where, women had that small housekeeping budget, which was never enough, and that they were told they had to be grateful for that. But, there's this whole move to the trad wife move.
Oh, the trad wife. Uh-huh.
I was actually shocked because my eldest son, who's 15, announced that he wanted to eventually marry a trad wife. And I was like going, oh my God, what have I done wrong as a mother? I think it's kind of a little bit of a zeitgeist. I'm hoping it's going to disappear.
Yeah, look, I was really surprised too, but I think it's just I think sometimes there's just a pushback against what we know, and it's almost let's be controversial. Whereas what people don't realize is it might feel lovely to be taken care of, but you know what? I want my husband to take care of me by giving me foot rubs or buying me lunch, not by me having to go to him and ask for everything. And it was interesting that you say that, because I had a conversation with a mum the other day where she said that one of her school mums was really disappointed because her daughter had turned to her and said, "Oh, I just want to be a kept wife, and I want to drive around in a Range Rover and go and have lunches all day."
The
And
sugar daddy,
a
sugar
sugar
baby.
daddy situation. And
Yeah.
in the end, the mum said, "Well, first of all, you're going to now come and start working in my business because I want you to be skilled up. But two, I want you to think every time you want something," and she started doing it to model it to her daughter, "you need to ask your partner for it." So if she went to do something, she would pretend to ask her husband for it. And her daughter was like, "Ew, what are you doing?" And she goes, "Well, if you want to be a trad wife, if you want to play that part, this is what it's going to involve." So it's just realizing, yeah, it's really interesting what's coming up at the moment. And I really hope it's a moment and not something that people actually want.
It is a really divisive space, and I want to be very clear for anyone listening who's chosen to stay at home.
Oh,
Care for their it's a
absolutely.
conscious choice. It's the
100%.
problem is when this is romanticised in terms of going back to these values without thinking about the long-term financial consequences and planning for it, which I guess brings me to something that you've written so passionately about once again, which is this concept of superannuation and how to make it more equitable.
Yeah, and I love that you said that, Serena, because it is all about choice at the end of the day. I want you to have choice to choose to stay home if that's your choice, choose to go to work, choose to have a business. But at the end of the day, to also have financial independence within that. And where I see a lot of women fall down with financial independence is superannuation. And women are still the ones that are primarily having that time off when they have a child. So they're often the primary care person that's at home. And when I was a financial advisor, I would often have a couple, and it was usually a heterosexual couple having these conversations where I would ask, "So are you choosing to stay home, or what's going on?" And usually the husband would reply with, well, it's not worth her going back to work because childcare takes up too high a percentage of her wage." At which point I would usually say, "Please tell me you've thought about a percentage of both wages, not just her." Absolutely. Let me hope that you've thought about the superannuation that she would lose and the compounding effects of that super. And no one had ever thought of that. I didn't have a single client who ever had thought that. But what I realized is that we're just not having that conversation that is with financial literacy at the heart of it. And when I would talk to people and when I used to talk to friends that were having babies, I'd say, "Well, I know money's tight, but please tell me you're at least having a conversation with your partner about super splitting." And no one knew what it was. So I started to really, on socials, talk more and more about it. So essentially, super splitting in Australia is where if I'm living with my partner, so it can be married or de facto, I can split up to 85% of the previous year's contribution. It's a really simple form they can fill in on their website. So you can backdate it insofar as if you're only hearing about it now, you can be super splitting. They could be gifting you essentially 85% of previous year's super, and you can just keep going with that. There's a real fallacy that people think that, oh, and this is probably the biggest argument I've had to it, is, "But I'll get it anyway." Or the partner saying to their partner, "You'll get it anyway." And yet what
Yeah.
I saw as a financial advisor is that often wasn't the case, because either the wife would prioritize the house um, instead of the super, and you can't eat your house is an asset, not an investment. Or two, it would just be too hard. Like, it was too emotional. There was too much angst involved. She just thought, you know what, this is too hard. Fine, just have it if he put up a fight. So this way, it's splitting it when times are good. rather than having to have that issue if it's going to be an issue later on.
Yeah, all of that makes total sense, and I must say, hubby has that same view, and that's based on both of us going through divorces. I had to give up a third of my superannuation because I earned more than my ex-husband, even though it was
Yeah,
an abusive
wow.
situation, which really, really hurt,
It
actually.
would.
But thankfully, I've rebuilt that, which is a good thing. But this is a common thing. But in the case of our superannuation, which is a particular government scheme, the only beneficiaries can be a spouse. But I'm assuming that's not the case. So, like, you could be, someone could, for instance, give their superannuation to children from an earlier marriage or anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had a situation in the last couple of weeks where my brother-in-law has passed away. He's remarried and he is gifting his superannuation to his kids. And yes, there's tax consequences, but they're dependents, and they're not her children. So the new wife and the old wife, neither of them will be benefiting from that super, but the kids will. And that's a great thing. But again, it's don't presume you're going to get something, because life will happen or situations can change. And so it may not come to you. It's about putting on our own financial oxygen mask.
Yeah, that's a great example, and that's fine if all the parties are aware of it. But if you've got
Yeah.
a wife who had chosen to stay home and was reliant on that income, and then suddenly overnight through death or other things, it's not there, and then the estate planning wasn't what they thought, or maybe the will
Uh-huh.
hadn't been updated, this can be a real problem.
It absolutely can be. And too many people are blindsided by that at a time where you just don't want to be. Plus, more women are retiring with so significantly less superannuation than men. Women over 55 are at growing risk of homelessness, often because we don't have super. Women are starting businesses faster than the blokes. And again, we're not paying ourselves super in our businesses. So we're missing out on it in so many different places. This is one way to start to fill the tank back up in something that I think is just fair. Like if I was made PM for a day, I would mandate this. We shouldn't have to have this conversation. It's just fair. Like it passes the pub test of, should this happen if one of you stays home? Of course it could. So I genuinely don't understand why it's not mandated.
Oh, I guess, like, I remember when Super first came in, I think I started a full-time job a couple of years after, or a year or two after, but it was still fairly new. And to be honest, I think in those days, no one really thought about, say, people taking time out for caring or anything. It was this
No.
sort of this presumption, because it was based, I guess, originally on the public service model of, the nice nuclear family and the dad with a
Yeah.
stable job who will be in the same job for life,
Uh-huh.
be providing for the whole family. I don't think no one ever really thought about circumstances that would be different from that.
They absolutely didn't, which is why in our modern time, it's time for a relook at it. And I really hope a politician, I mean, it just doesn't make sense that someone wouldn't do this. I think it's time for a PM to be brave and say, yeah, we're just going to mandate. If one of you stays home, you just have to split it for the percentage that you're staying home. Easy.
So you haven't had the sort of conventional start saving and investing, young, smooth sailing kind of background yourself. And you've spoken a lot about compound interest, but is it ever too late to start investing? What about people who've had big disruptions in their life and have had to start again?
It's absolutely not too late. My theory is it's not too early and it's not too late. So I meet a lot of mums who are really worried for their kids that not being able to afford a house, not being able to give them that house deposit. If I had an 18-year-old and I could convince my 18-year-old, even if I subsidised it for a few years, to invest $250 a month for the next 50 years, which an 18-year-old has, and if they got the average return from the last 30 years that the share market has given, they would have almost $4 million in 50 years.
Wow.
You don't need large amounts. It's just time. But of course, there'll be someone here that's in their 50s going, but I don't have time, in which case I want to say to them, oh, I intend to live to 100. Women's average age is 88. We're outliving the blokes. So if you know how to find more cash, then you have time to invest. So in my community, for example, We have people pet sitting, we have people dog walking, we have people learning to find more cash. Because if you can find 20 a day over 30 years, that's going to be over $1 million. So if you don't have enough super and you haven't prioritized investing, and if you start with small amounts now, you absolutely can have quite a significant chunk of money at the tail end of your life, where instead of you having to drink cask rosé and wonder whether you should turn the heat on, you can go, oh, it's a Wednesday night, I'm just going to run that heater and not even think about it. So
I was just laughing because I've had my dad visiting while we've
Oh.
been in Traralgon for table tennis, and we did open a bottle of cask wine last night, and once we let it sufficiently breathe, it was
that
actually
was nice.
but we're actually not big drinkers to start with, but there's a whole resurgence now. Younger generations are rediscovering the benefits of the carb Bordeaux.
Of the goon bag, exactly. I love that so much. But my mother-in-law, so my husband's dad passed away more than a decade ago now. She and we visited with her on the weekend. We subsidise her pension because she can't afford to run without our monies that we give her every single week. She can't afford to run her air conditioner during the middle of summer and during winter. Like, it's really, I don't want to be in my 80s like she is and going, oh, I'm tiny, I'm frail, and I'm freezing, and I can't turn the heat on. I just want it to be a no-brainer.
Well, the other week it was minus 7.5 degrees at our home in Canberra, and I would not have wanted to be thinking, can I afford to turn the heater on? And it's not just the discomfort, it's the health aspects of that too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's particularly as you get older, it's more important that you don't have that really cold air and all the rest of it. Yeah. So no, you definitely can do it with small amounts and you absolutely have time. But the most important thing is to start.
Yes.
So it's really interesting. So a lot of the stats are, so if we go to a US Fidelity study, all of the men and women, a whole bunch of men and women, so there was more than 1,000 asked, are men or women the better investors? 83% said men are better investors.
Wow.
And yet there's at least 3 longitudinal studies, from the Warwick Business School study to a Sydney University study, UTS study, to another study in the US, that all showed that whilst both men and women outperformed the index, women were better investors than men.
Wow.
And part of it is because of our lack of self-confidence. So we don't try to time the market. We invest regularly with small amounts. Whereas there's a University of Essex study that just came out this year that said men are more emotional investors, which is why I know, I loved it so much, which is why they're not as good investors as women. So what they mean by that is they'll trade more regularly. If their footy team is losing, it'll affect how they trade. It's really fascinating, the psychology of blokes. But the problem is, I think, because blokes talk about it more and are more confident and talk about their trades, we presume they're better at investing. Whereas actually the slow and steady approach, just like the tortoise and the hare, that women do, and that's a generalization, but that's generally what the research has discovered. It's a better, more sustainable approach.
Wow, that is fascinating, but it also, I guess, tallies with my own observations. And this is not share trading, this is property, but I remember years ago going to a kid's birthday party, and a dad from the childcare sort of circle was talking about how he planned to go to an auction and all his methods that he was going to use to, get the house for the best value. And then coincidentally, a couple of months after that, I went to auction to buy what was then my previous apartment, and I was successful at that auction. But I used a very different approach. I spent some time getting to know the real estate agent to assure him of my credibility. I was the only person who bid on that, so then I had a little bit of negotiating room. It was quite a different strategy, but what I noticed was that a large proportion of the people bidding that day were in fact women.
Yeah, I love that. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's just, in popular kind of thought, you'd think, it's the aggressive ones who are the successful ones.
Yeah, absolutely not. And again, it's that conception versus reality, right? Sorry, perception versus reality. And in your example, it's exactly right that women historically, the research is finding we actually make really good investors.
But do we believe in ourselves enough?
No.
Are we doing it enough?
Absolutely not. And that's the problem. So one of the themes that I loved out of COVID, other than social isolating and not hugging, because I'm super introverted and I can't cope with any of those things, thanks COVID, is that there were more women investing than ever before. So there was this real interest and resurgence of women investing. So I love that theme from COVID. But the problem is not enough of us are continuing with it. And there still we have more to go for, particularly women in their 40s and 50s, to realize that, hey, we should be jumping onto this as well.
Yeah, it makes sense. And talking about that age group, there's something
Oh,
else that you've been really quite passionate about writing about and to, I guess, destigmatizing, and that is the impact of menopause on women, including on their finances.
yeah, absolutely. So menopause, they're discovering now, is $1 billion issue. And it's $1 billion issue because of the lost wages that we have, the people resigning from jobs, and just the cost of it. And what we know now that the research is showing us is that for women, we have that gap when we stop and have kids. But then there's another, and that affects our super, that affects our earning ability. But then there's another one that happens when we have menopause. And what they're discovering is that women are leaving jobs, or they're dropping part-time, or they're leaving partners. And then when they get into menopause from perimenopause, they're looking back when the brain fog has cleared and the rage has settled and the symptoms have calmed and gone, oh, I want to get back in the workforce and I can't because my age is really heart preventing that. Maybe I wouldn't have left that marriage. I wish I hadn't have sold that business. And as someone that went through early onset menopause, where just the sound of my husband, who I love dearly, breathing next to me on the couch made me just want to throttle him. And also the brain fog I remember I was doing a podcast with Mama Mia, and I would just lose words. The wrong thing would come out of my mouth. They were doing filming with me and I was just wet with sweat. And the gorgeous young girls were like, oh, do you need a powder? I'm like, no, I need to change your clothes in a shower. But I just didn't understand. And I think too many women in that situation will go, I can't cope with this. I know I can't do my job. So I'm going to therefore um, pack it in and drop it back, and that is affecting our finances. Whereas for me, it's my message is make sure you speak to a GP. And for me, I had to speak to 4 GPs before one would talk to me about things that actually worked for my symptoms. But to get those symptoms under control so that you can make those decisions that are actually helpful for your finances.
And I guess this generation we currently have, the Generation X, is probably like the largest cohort of women who've actually been in the paid workforce or in business than we've ever had. And I guess traditionally a lot of these symptoms were perhaps not talked about outside of women's circles, but they
Yeah.
certainly weren't showing up en masse in the workplace.
No, absolutely. And it's probably the thing I love more than ever about when menopause is really having a moment right now is that news presenters are saying, oh, just having a menopause moment. Celebrities are talking about it. Books are being written. So it's really, we're reclaiming it this is not something that should be stigmatized. This is something that most women will go through. So let's put the information out there and do something about it. And I remember when I asked my mum about these sort of things, she was almost like, oh, yeah, that was really hard. But that's kind of all I got. Instead of, I know for me, I've got my IC Lauren, who's just turned 40. I tell her everything. Like the next generation coming through is going to be so ready for this. Because I didn't even know what the words perimenopause was when I first heard that.
No.
No idea it was a thing.
Well, I must admit that I started going into perimenopausal state when I just met my now husband, and I kept thinking I was becoming pregnant.
Oh,
It was really funny because
absolutely.
it's like,
Yeah.
what is happening? Like I'm not a young person, really. In my early 40s. So we sort of laughed, but for the first year or two, I was convinced all the time this was what was happening.
Yeah. Well, I was looking back now, mine would have been probably 37. So really young when I was going through perimenopause, and never would have occurred to me to equate menopause with someone in their 30s. So yeah, you genuinely just think you're going mad. And I agree on my poor husband. We'd been together for 5 years. I'm sure he was looking at me going, "Where's the sweet young thing that I that I married? Oh my gosh, who's this creature?" Because you genuinely just feel like you're turning into a different person. So very grateful for hormone patches and doctors that know what they're talking about.
And then the hard thing, obviously, as you alluded to, is women trying to re-enter the workforce. There's a fair amount of discrimination against older people, as it is,
Yeah,
but then against older women particularly.
absolutely. And there is this ageism that women particularly suffer. Like George Clooney can have gorgeous grey hair. And interestingly, when he dyes his hair black, people are devastated. They want him silver fox, whereas a woman will go grey and they'll be like, "Oh my gosh, why would you do that to yourself?" Like there's this real double standard when it comes to women and aging. And I think what we do and what I've noticed the effect is that one, it's problematic if we try to re-enter the workforce. But two, we also layer that onto ourselves with, in your question before around investing, if you're in your 40s, 50s, you're probably going to say, "I don't have long enough to invest," because of that ageism that is happening. So it's being aware of that, and making sure if you're trying to re-enter the place that anything you put in, that has nothing to do with it, that you're really pushing your skills versus your age. Plus, there's a lot of incentives for employers to hire an older workforce now. So it's really making sure that that's the thing that you lead with, perhaps.
That's great, actually. That really makes a lot of sense. And believe it or not, I have one final question.
Oh my gosh, I know it's gone fast.
I know because we had so much to talk about, which is, do you have a Frugalista tip to share? I'm sure as someone who's great with money, you probably do lots of things that are quite frugal.
Yeah, so my one of my biggest things, one of my heritage is my nana was from Hong Kong, so I'm part Chinese and part Scot. So I have frugality baked into my bones, I say.
Like this.
Yeah, so from shopping in op shops with my nana to learning how to make anything from leftovers from my Scottish grandma. And I think because both sides will eat anything, then that's just something that I've learnt. But probably my frugal tip is something that I've been doing for many years now, where my husband and I on a Sunday will do a big cook up. It might be cruciferous soup, it might be lentils, it could be brisket, it could be, he's got a beans recipe. We have 2-cup glass Pyrex dishes, and we cook it up, and then we load up all of those Pyrex dishes, pop what they are on it and put them in the freezer. And that way I never have takeaway. I never have Uber Eats. I have these delicious meals in the freezer ready to go, which I will have one tonight without having to have that mental admin of, what do I have to eat? But also that cost of, I'm going to have to buy something on the road.
It makes so much difference because no matter how organised we think we are, there's always one day where we're just shattered for whatever reason.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah.
Just not well. There's flu season at the moment. Some people I know are still going through COVID again.
Yes.
How many time? And you'll just have days when you're off and you just don't have the energy.
Absolutely. And I always make sure there is at least half a dozen chicken soups in there for exactly that reason, all made on bone broth, so that when you're starting to feel where you're not well or you're a bit run down, you can just there's really nutritious things to reach for as well.
I love that. That'll be better for my boys who don't always love nutritious things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you so very much. Now, I assume people can find your books in all good bookstores.
Yeah, I don't know if your finances is actually run out in many places now, but it's at most libraries, which is a good frugal tip. And it's going to be re-released in January, as well as my next book, which I'm super excited about, Dare to Be Wealthy. But we've given you a link with a conference that we've got coming up, some information on shares, some freebies, and all sorts of good stuff.
Exactly. Thank you so much. So yes, there is a whole website, a web page specifically for the Joyful Frugalista listeners, which will be in the show notes.
Beautiful. Enjoy.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.